Hey, this is Ryan Turner here from VWDiesel.net, and today we're going to be putting an injection pump and a timing belt on an AAZ. Now, the same basic procedure works for any VE pump diesel, whether it be an AAZ, an MF, an ME, an AHU, or even an ALH. It's the same basic enough procedure. But this one is going in our AAZ Caddy swap. So I bought this motor without a pump on it, so we're going to put a pump on it because I had some. And then we're going to cover that in this video here, because a lot of people are really intimidated when it comes to putting a pump on a vehicle, you know, because getting the crank time and the cam time and the pump time and everything together without bending valves and making sure it runs is just, it's really intimidating for a new guy that hasn't done it before, or even an intermediate guy that hasn't done it that often or hasn't done it in a while. I haven't done it in a while either, so I'm going to have to go back over some of this stuff and refresh my memory, even though it's not that complicated of a procedure. It's just something that you want to double check and triple check and just make sure, because this is a very critical stage and you don't want to mess anything up. So time is your friend here, research is your friend here. Watching this video a couple times might help out. So let's go ahead and let's start this process and get this motor ready to go. Here we have the side of the AAZ motor. I don't know where the cam is set, or the crank is set. I don't know where the cam is set. I've loosened the gear off to get this back plate off earlier in a video series. And the pump is it's just thrown on here. It's still loose. It's roughly tightened down. So what we're going to do is we're going to go through setting all these things where they need to be. A couple tools that we have is a crank pulley, or a cam pulley sprocket. We're going to use that on this injection pump here. We have a Mark III AHU crank lock. Both of these tools came from Metal Nerd, so you can check those out at metalnerd.com. And that'll just fit over here into, get my head out of the way, into some little grooves here, and it just loosely holds it into place. We'll actually bolt the crankshaft to it, so that'll hold that in place. We will have a tool to lock the camshaft into position. That's still over there in the box, so I have to run over there and get that. And then you'll also need your assorted tools to do this, you know, sockets and wrenches and all that jazz. We're going to start this process by removing the valve cover. On this engine, it happens to be 3 10mm bolts and these little grommets and washers. We will remove the valve cover gasket as well. And now we will check to see where the camshaft is at. Starting off with the camshaft, there's a couple things that you want to check. First, to make sure that it's a top dead center, the point of this lobe will be up and the point of this lobe on cylinder 1 will be up. This is the crankshaft, and that means these valves are not depressed at all and the valves are completely closed. So we'll look for both of these to be up, and then at the end of the crankshaft we will look at the slot there. At the end of the camshaft here, you will see a slot at the end of it that goes across the entire distance. This is for a lock tool that will slide in that groove and go into place. Now, currently, it is not quite perfectly aligned, so it doesn't just slide in there. But if you look at the lock tool itself, there's a lip here, and this lip is made to go inside that and lock into place there. This is not for torque. This is simply for alignment. Do not put your tool in here in the end and try to break the pulley loose if you are at that step. Don't do that. That'll just mess stuff up. Use the actual pulley holder or make one yourself. While the camshaft may be on just about top dead center, the crankshaft may be halfway out. The crankshaft is made to rotate twice for every time that the camshaft here rotates once. So while this is on top dead center just about, the crankshaft could be either on top dead center or it could be 180 degrees out. So that's what we're going to check next. These two do have to work in relationship. So if you have to rotate the crankshaft a large amount, you may also have to rotate the camshaft in relationship with the crankshaft to bring it into top dead center, because this is an interference engine and the valves will get in the way and stop you from rotating them. Here is the inspection hole to tell whether the crankshaft is at top dead center or not. There is a little arrow right here that looks down and it points onto a mark on the flywheel itself. So let's look at that mark. This is just an extra I had laying around. If you look right here, there is a little 0 with a tick on it. You can also tell it's between these notches right here. So if you're rotating around and you see a notch here, or you know that you're coming up pretty close to it. And that arrow that is on the transmission will point down at this, and then you will line up that arrow with this tick mark on the flywheel itself to know where, if you're at top dead center. So let's look down then through the hole at that. Here we are going to attempt to rotate the crankshaft and the camshaft together so that we can bring them around to top dead center. This is going to take a 12.19 millimeter for the crankshaft bolt. If you have an older motor and it happens to be a 6-point and not a 12-point, then that would be a good time to go ahead and replace that bolt with the upgraded 12-point style. We are also going to use our camshaft holding tools. Basically, they're a set of angle irons with some little nubs at the end to hold on to the crankshaft. You could make these yourself if you wanted to. This particular set came from Metal Nerd. Very good stuff. So I would go check them out. Chuck there is a good guy, and he makes great products. So we're going to start kind of doing this together, but you could do a little bit at a time. Now you can go so far and you can lightly feel them tap. Now I'm not putting any pressure here. You can feel the valves there. So we definitely don't want to exert any pressure on this to bend these valves. Alright, our camshaft is just about perfect at top dead center. It's not quite, it'll need a little bit of tweaking for the lock to slide in, so that's okay. Now we're going to take our flashlight and look down in the hole and see if we can tell how close we are. Alright, now we are going to take our camshaft locking tool, put it down here at the back, and then take our camshaft rotating tool, and we're going to wiggle it back and forth till the lock slides in. And you want it nice and even so the lock will wiggle back and forth in the channel. There's not a lot of wiggle room, but you want to make sure that you do that. And there's actually a procedure that I'll post where you can use feeler gauges to make sure that this is perfectly perfectly perfect. Now that the crankshaft and the camshaft are both locked into position, we're going to take a 19mm, the same one we use on our crankshaft, and take our hold down tool and break this bolt loose and free the sprocket up for the actual timing of the pump and everything. So we will hold that. There we go. Lightly loosen it. Then we are going to take and knock this loose from behind with a punch. To remove the cam sprocket, there is a tiny hole in the back plate here that I'm going to take a 3/16 Allen, because that just works well, and I'm going to lightly tap it till it comes off. There we go. We can see now that it is loose. Zooming in here with the pump in the right location, you can see that you have access to the other pump mounting bolts as well to loosen or tighten the pump. Our pump is still pretty loose because I haven't tightened them up yet. So with the pump locked in place, I'm going to go ahead and snug up the 3 bolts here, plus the one on the back side of the pump, and then we'll get ready to throw our timing belt on here. Now that the camshaft is locked and the gear is loose, the crankshaft is locked into place, the pump is locked into place, we are ready to put our timing belt on finally. Sometimes it's a good idea if you're in colder areas to let the timing belt sit out in the sun or over a HVAC vent to try to warm up. You don't want to apply any real heat to it. You just want it to be warm so that it stretches and gives a bit. The tensioner is on, but I've already taken the nut off of it so that it can slide out. And what we're going to do is we're just going to barely put it on the outside edge. Start by wrapping it around. Whoops. It will jump off on you, so don't worry about that. This distance, the distance between these teeth, don't matter because this pulley does bend. But what does matter is the spacing between the injection pump pulley and the crankshaft. So you want to make sure that you have all of this slack here taken out of it. Now you see, if I put this back fairly far on the pulleys here, you don't have enough room to get this bottom part of the belt on. So now that it's close, I'll go ahead and I'll inch up some of the slack here. And just take your time with this process. It is a process. They don't always go on smoothly the first time. Now on this pulley itself there is a locking tab, and that little locking tab is supposed to be rotated up into place here. So once the belt is all the way back on the pulleys, you may get a little bit of timing belt fuzz there. We're going to most likely use a screwdriver to get this pulley tab back into its position. Alright. And now the belt is on. It is more intimidating than it really is. Just take your time, make sure your marks don't move. Our cam's still good here. Our pump's still on spot. There's not a lot of excess slop. This is very tight through here, which is what we want. Now that we can get our, now that this is all together, we'll go ahead and we'll tighten this up, and we will be able to remove our locks, and we should be pretty close to top dead center on everything still. If you look here, the pulley has a little notch right here on this metal outside piece that the plastic ring holds around, and then it has a corresponding notch on this inside washer here. So what you're going to do is rotate it up like this until, let me go back because I don't have that loose enough. What you're going to do is you're going to rotate it up until the two notches line up. And then you'll take a 13 millimeter and tighten it down. There we go. I just had to use what I had handy. Now we are ready to tighten up the camshaft sprocket, remove all of our locks, and give it a few turns around to make sure everything still lines up before we go to timing the injection pump itself. Alright, our sprocket lock is still loose. Now that everything is loose and our motor is free to turn, we're going to check our belt tightness. Make sure it's not too tight, it can still turn. And now we are going to bar it over 2 or 3 complete rotations just to make sure everything spins freely. Alright, zoomed in here we can see the bolt itself. It is between all of the injector lines, and we'll just simply take a 12 mil on an extension. Maybe we don't need the extension. Alright, just slightly loosen it up. I would go ahead and make sure this whole area is clean first before you do this. And the plug has been removed. Has quite a bit of threads on it. We're going to take the adapter piece and thread it into the pump itself with the motor at top dead center. And then we are going to take our gauge, slide it in till it fits. Okay, so it's here at 0. You can barely see it there. And then we're going to go around and give it 2 millimeters of preload. And that 2 millimeters of preload is just so that the plunger has enough to move back that way into the pump. So we're going to take our 19 millimeter, put it on the crankshaft, and go back until the gauge, we're going to go counterclockwise, so towards the alternator, back until it stops moving. Okay, and you can see it stopped moving there. We'll go forward again just so you can watch the needle, and we'll go back till it stops there. Now we're going to 0 that. Alright, now we are going to go back to top dead center and see what kind of lift we have on the pump. Okay. Right here is 50 on my gauge. And we need, for an AAZ, it is 80, which is right about here. So we are simply going to rotate the pump until we get there. Make sure you loosen things up first. Oops. Alright, too much. That gave us a millimeter. That's 90. Ooh, shit. Alright, that's 83, 84. Now it's 80 plus or minus 2 for the spec, but I like to set these just a little bit advanced, so I'm going to call it good. Now we are ready to tighten our bolts up, remove the gauge, and start the motor. Wow. Removing the gauge. And here is the new plug. Make sure that you have the copper washer on it. And then we'll tighten that back up. With the pump now timed correctly, everything tightened up, we can now put the injection lines back on it. We can put the valve cover back on it. And anything else that we took off during this process, and get ready to fill the pump, bleed the system out of air, and you'll be ready to start it here pretty soon. I hope that video helped you. It seems like it's kind of a mystery procedure for a lot of guys, that timing the pump is a big deal. And as long as you take your time and make sure that you read and watch this video, maybe watch a few more so you get a big idea of what you're actually doing here. It's really not that hard. It just seems intimidating. If you have any questions, just feel free to leave them below and we'll try to help you out.